The body of the young rapper Addarren Ross was found in Winnfield, that's in Wynn Parish. It all happened last week. Police believe an argument over a video game turned.
He was just a kid with a dream, and he just wanted to get out of here, and that's all, that's all it is to it.
Snoop was still a trooper, and he was determined to beset his dream. Snoop made it, and Snoop made it to the top.
I woke up that morning, man, and my mama had told me my little cousin Snoop had just got shot. I'm like, oh man, maybe he did some park stuff or something, just took a bullet. But man, when they told me it's like, man, I took a piece of my heart, my soul,
And we sat in the yard for about 30 minutes hugging, looking up in the sky.
Wow.
In the early hours of a seemingly normal Thursday morning in 2013, 18-year-old Addarren Ross, better known by his stage name, Lil Snupe, was playing video games at his friend's apartment in Winnfield, Louisiana, unaware of the danger he was in. For that same morning, Lil Snupe would be executed in cold blood. The day was Wednesday, June 19, 2013. And Lil Snupe had spent the afternoon playing video games with two of his friends in the Maplewood Apartments in Winnfield, Louisiana. The three had been playing NBA 2K for several hours, and at one point during the night, they decided to start betting on the outcome of their games. What happened next has been the subject of much speculation since the fateful night in 2013, but official police reports state that around 4 a.m., Lil Snupe and 36-year-old Tony Holden, one of Snoop's friends, who was present at the scene, were playing a game with the $100 wager. The game was extremely even until right at the very end, Lil Snupe beat Tony on a buzzer beater. According to several sources familiar with the incident, Edric Stewart, also known as Lil E, escalated the situation and sparked a confrontation between Tony and Snoop, claiming that Lil Snupe had cheated Tony out of $100. Although Tony and Lil E had never met before that night, it was reported that Lil E fueled the argument until Tony lost his temper. Allegedly, Tony took out his handgun in a fit of rage and used it to shoot Snoop through the chest twice, ending his life instantly. Immediately after the incident, Lil E and Tony Holden fled the scene. Less than 2 hours later, the news made its way to Snoop's mother, Denisha Chester, who immediately drove over to the scene, arriving at the Maplewood Apartments even before the police did. Once the police arrived, they prevented her from going in and seeing her son and made her stay outside until they had analyzed the scene of the incident. As news of Lil Snupe's passing spread in Lil Snupe's hometown of Jonesboro, Louisiana, the entire community gathered to mourn the passing of such a young and talented artist.
Several people are remembering the young artist as more than just a rapper.
He was just a kid with a dream, and he just wanted to get out of here, and that's all, that's all it is to it.
Friends of 18-year-old Addarren Ross say he was a small-town kid with big-time dreams.
Less than 2 months before his passing, Snoop had been signed by Dream Chaser Records, a rapidly growing record label run by Robert Rameek Williams, better known by his stage name, Meek Mills. In addition to the dozens of friends and family members who came together to remember Lil Snupe, several big names from the rap industry also reached out to show their support for his mother, who had raised him from the time he was born on account of Snoop's father being in prison for his son's entire life. Throughout the whole process, Snoop's dad, Charlie Brown, was extremely unsupportive. Meek Mill, who had taken Lil Snupe under his wing from the moment he first heard his mixtape, was reportedly the first rapper to contact Denisha and send her condolences. According to Snoop's mother, Lil E, who had been at the scene of the incident earlier, was also present at the funeral. After the tragic incident, Denisha Chester spoke to the police and begged them to ensure justice was made in her son's name. But little did she know that her nightmare had just begun.
The chief of police have looked me in my eyes and told me that he was going to make sure that he crossed all his T's and dotted all of his I's. He told me that every time I spoke with him, and he did neither.
Just 6 days after her son's execution, Tony Holden, the owner of the apartment where Snupe was shot, came forward and allegedly confessed to the homicide. Initially, police charged him with first-degree manslaughter, illegal possession of a firearm, as a convicted felon, and armed robbery. Without revealing too many details, police also detained Lil E and charged him with manslaughter, confirming that he too had been involved in the homicide. However, despite the initial charges, neither of the two suspects ended up being sentenced for the homicide. After a short stay in the county jail, Lil E was only charged with illegal use of a weapon and a vicious act, for which he received a $1,000 fine.
He is being charged with is illegal use of a weapon in a violent crime. And if you research that, in the state of Louisiana, that only carries up to 2 years max or a $1,000 fine.
As for Tony Holden, even though he had allegedly confessed to the homicide, he was never charged for it. In the end, Holden was sentenced to 10 years in prison for illegal possession of a firearm as a convicted felon, as well as 20 years on an unrelated illegal substance charge.
And keep in mind, he got sentenced for being a convicted felon with a firearm. They gave him 20 years for a charge, 10 years for the convicted felon with a firearm. He also was charged with the same charge, I believe, as originally. However, they ran it concurrent. He got his time.
After receiving this news, Snupe's mother was devastated and extremely confused. There were only 3 people in the apartment at the time of her son's execution, and yet neither of the suspects had been held legally responsible for the incident. The Winnfield chief of police even attempted to write off her son's homicide as a deal gone wrong, alleging that the autopsy report had revealed the presence of illegal substances in his system at the time of his passing.
This wasn't no deal gone bad situation. And I think that's what they tried to paint the narrative, because the police told me, he said, no, the district attorney said, well, you know, your son had marijuana and promethazine in his system. I said, did that kill him? He said, no. I said, well, don't mention that to me.
Denisha was enraged at the police's handling of her son's case and began expressing her frustration on multiple news outlets and social media. One of her main sources of anger was the fact that less than 8 hours after her son had been executed, unidentified suspects broke into the apartment to rob it. This, of course, made it more difficult to use the evidence that had been left behind from the previous night's incident. Around that time, Lil Snupe's mother spoke to Tony Holden in prison, and he told her a very different version of the story. According to him, there was a lot of cash in the apartment on the night of the homicide, and Lil E had been allegedly clutching his gun suspiciously while Tony and Snupe played video games, which made Tony believe that Lil E was planning a robbery. After finishing the game, Tony mentioned that he kicked Lil E out of his apartment, but the situation continued to escalate when Lil E started banging on the door with his gun. As per Tony's account, he opened the door for Lil E, which led to multiple shots being exchanged between the two. Amid the chaos, Lil Snupe tried to run away, but was allegedly intercepted by Edric, who proceeded to rob him, shot him in the hand, and he succumbed to his injuries.
And that's what he said.
He told me, he said, it's not the people with the money that's going to change. It's going to be the people without the money that's going to change.
And
the reason why that hurt is because that was so true.
Despite the police department's version of the events, Tony's story was consistent with what Denisha believed had happened that night. She had always suspected Lil E had assassinated her son, not Tony. Every time they had interacted after the incident, he had given her a different version of the story and had never seemed honest or forthcoming. Unfortunately, the police weren't diligent about interrogating Lil E. In the months following the incident, Denisha mentioned that on the morning of the homicide, police spent a total of 5 minutes interrogating him after tracking him down. By the time the funeral was over and Denisha came back to the police station, he was already a free man. In addition to Tony Holden's story, there was also a mountain of evidence pointing to Lil E. After the homicide, it was confirmed that he took off in the car Snoop had been driving, which is incredibly suspicious in and of itself. As if that weren't enough, police found Snoop's blood in the car after the incident, but despite the solid evidence, police never held Lil E responsible for his involvement in the homicide.
And if nothing else, Addarren left Snoop, his bro, his friend. He left him, jumped in the vehicle which Snoop was driving, and he left him. So my question would be, where would the keys come from?
Sadly, this was not the only time the Winnfield Police Department failed to deliver on its promise to serve and protect. About a month after the homicide, Denisha received an email that was sent from her son's email address. She immediately went to the police to see if they could track the IP address, or at least launch an investigation to learn who still had access to Snoop's email, but the police did nothing.
I also received an email from Snoop's email asking for new music 1 month after Snoop was killed. Since a close friend of Snoop's, do you have any unheard music? I then went to the police station, logged into their computer through Gmail, showed them the email we received, asked them to track the IP address so we can find out who has Snoop's phone. That was never done.
In 2015, 2 years after Snoop's passing, Denisha received a letter from the Winnfield Police Department stating that the investigation would not be pursued any further and that her son's case was closed.
2015, I received a letter telling me that my son's case was closed. They didn't have enough decency to meet with me, give me a phone call. You sent me a letter. That was the most cowardice thing I've ever seen. Like, you don't have enough courage to call me or meet with me, to look me in my face and tell me, hey, we're just not going to do anything about your son being killed.
Tragically, that same year, a warrant was put out for Lil E's arrest in connection with the assassination of another young man. As of 2023, he has been on the run for 5 years. 2 years later, in 2017, Denisha Chester's suspicions were finally confirmed. Ballistic evidence confirmed that the bullets that had been found in Lil Snoop's body had come from Lil E's gun, not from Tony Holden's. Unfortunately, Snoop's case was no longer the Winnfield Police Department's priority, and no further action was taken. To this day, it's still unknown what exactly happened on the night of June 20th, 2013. Despite his tragically short career, Lil Snoop's legacy continued to live on through his fans, his collaborators, his friends, and most importantly, his mother, who had continued campaigning for justice for over a decade.
One, Tony Holden did not kill Snoop. It was Addarren Stewart.
In 2017, she produced a documentary called The Dream Chaser about her son's life. It was screened at the 2021 DocuFest Film Festival in Dallas. She also wrote a book about her son and has continued being an active voice on social media, constantly exposing the police's poor handling of the case and demanding justice for her son. Even though he had turned 18 just 7 days before his execution, Snoop had already collaborated with some of the biggest names in the industry, including Boosie Badass, Meek Mill, and DJ Khaled, and was on his way to superstardom in the rap world. He is remembered by his loyal fans and admiring collaborators as an extremely talented young rapper who sacrificed everything to chase his dream. Frequently compared to Tupac, Lil Snoop is remembered for his enormous talent and potential, which the world was sadly only able to witness and enjoy for a short while. To this day, rappers such as Boosie Badass, Trey the Truth, Yo Gotti, and Meek Mill continue to show their love for Snoop by checking up on his mother every single year. In time, hopefully the perpetrator will be held responsible for his actions and justice will be made in Addarren Ross's name. Until then, rest in peace, Lil Snoop.